On today's Feel No Shame podcast, Rowan and I will speak to Alex Clark. Alex works in children's services and speaks to us about how to respond to suicidal thoughts and feelings as a professional, as well as going into the things that aren't so good in terms of responding as a professional. All of Alex's views and opinions are his and his alone and do not necessarily reflect the views of the organisation that he works for. We also find ourselves saying the word journey a lot. Enjoy!
Are we just starting now, or are we just gonna blue ball it, or just
blue ball it?
Yeah, why not? Just go in.
I don't think that means what you think it means.
No, I just thought it'd be a nice thing to say at 9:10 at night, but it could be listened at any time of the day.
Well, shall I introduce you to live on the air?
Go for it,
but not live. So this is Alex. Alex works in children's services. This is Alan. Alan works in youth engagement.
I do, and I am a Leeds fan, and Alex is a Manc scum fan. No, just
now.
Horrid to hear.
I am a Manchester United fan. Apologies to all of your beautiful listeners. I was very tempted to wear my Manchester United shirt, but I thought that'd be too offensive.
Why didn't you? Now I must say though, episode 6, I feel I feel relaxed now. I feel as though I can confront anyone. So no.
You can abuse this platform.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. But I'm just noticing for audio description purposes, if people aren't watching, they're listening. I'm loving Alex's camera because it's like he's slowing down time as he moves. I don't know if that's going to be picked up on the visual, but when Alex moves, sometimes it shifts. You can see time slowing around him. There, see, it's doing it now.
You've just worked out my secret skill.
There you go.
Shifter.
Everyone has a talent on Feel No Shame. Yeah.
Yes.
So you have Eric Cantona, Alan Smith. Anybody else in common?
Alfinger Haaland. Because he chopped off Roy Keane's legs.
Yeah, he didn't play for both, but he left a leg on Old Trafford. Is that right?
Literally, quite literally.
Yeah, it's hung up in Roy Keane's front room, I believe.
Hollowed out, and he drinks out of it. Probably
just gnaws on it every night.
Yeah,
probably
disgusting.
I don't like Mick McCarthy. I don't know. Maybe.
Where's he from?
Ireland.
Okay.
Watch the big. Oh, shut up. Anyway, yeah. Welcome to episode 6.
This is episode 6. How about that? Who would have thought we would have made it to 6 episodes?
No, we're actually breaking boundaries because normally this would be the last in the series because platforms do say on TV, I will give them 6 episodes, but no, we're going further. We're going 2 more, but for now, episode 6 is more important than the future. So yeah, Alex, welcome to Feel No Shame.
It's a genuine pleasure, and I'm really glad you're not ending the series with me.
Why? It'd be great.
And it's really exciting because I started in youth work, and youth work is definitely where my heart is.
Yeah.
And youth engagement. So, yeah, we do have things in common. Our football teams might not be, but we have mutual interests.
Exactly.
You're crossing no man's land on Christmas Day, and you're saying, come on now, let's not talk about football. Let's talk about youth engagement, youth work, and specifically today, responding to suicidal thoughts.
Oh, you segue beautifully.
Such a good link.
It's
Such
amazing.
a good link. But that's what we're here for. I mean, we can have the chit chat as well, but that's what we're here for. And hopefully, I mean, you probably, all 3 of us will have responded to suicidal thoughts at some point.
Yeah.
So we can all kind of chip in. But Alex is the guest. Take the seat. Go for it. Where should we begin?
You want me to begin as a professional before we deep straight into my childhood and my aces? I packed in lots of aces. I enjoyed the first episode as well. More aces than Roger said. But I think that kind of segued into my professional career, if I'm honest, as we reflect back, as many people that end up in the world we work in, right? So I think we can kind of unpick that, and I'm happy to share with the listeners and share with the both of you as we move forward. But my professional career absolutely started in youth work as a raw 20-year-old. And it was a very exciting job because I got paid to play football with young people. And to my astonishment, I went in there wanting to do sports work and came out with an absolute love and empathy for working with vulnerable people who are going through really difficult times and just want to be heard and want to be listened to. And I think that speaks for 99.9% of our young people in the world, right? That want to be heard and probably don't always get the opportunity to share their voice. So my professional career kind of started from there and then went into other pathways, and now I'm in children's services 0 to 19, supporting people who support vulnerable people. So kind of worked my way through really, but absolutely it's a weekly occurrence, and I actually think it's a really positive thing, and things you two are doing, and people like yourselves. Clearly, this kind of conversation is becoming easier for people.
Yeah,
because more people are more open at the minute of talking about suicidal thoughts and talking about how they're feeling, and reaching out to people. And I think as a professional, it's important to realise our responsibility in listening to people when they're reaching out. And people in my position, I'm not a mental health expert and I won't profess to be, but people might reach out to people in my kind of positions because they trust us or they want us to listen. And sometimes people who maybe don't have that professional background or feel they have that professional background, it's important that they're aware so that they can listen and feel confident to listen and hear what people are saying. So that's quite a long, drawn out, rambled intro to kind of where I'm at and why I'm here, and why I was very excited to come. And obviously, Rowan, I know I've kind of reached out to you, said I wanted to help out as much as I could, because I think it's really, really important, and really important for people, like I say, in that professional early help children's services world to understand their responsibilities, and also they've got support out there to be confident of having these conversations if people do approach them.
And I pounced on that offer of yours to help for a number of different reasons. But one of them was because when I was going through a tough time recently, you were one of the people that reached out to me and just kind of said, do you want to chat about anything? Is there anything I can do to help? And you definitely didn't have to do that because we knew each other for less than 1 year, over a decade ago. But you still reached out, and I really appreciated that. And I'll always appreciate that as well. But also, I know just from knowing you for that less than a year, a decade ago, that you are the kind of cheeky little 20-year-old, obviously not 20 anymore, but cheeky little 20-year-old that I would have wanted to have spoken to and played football with as a kid. And I'm wondering if when you first got into that job and you initially thought, this is great, I'm just going to be playing football with these kids, did you find more often than not that suicidal thoughts or otherwise, they just wanted to talk? They wanted to play, of course, but they did just want to talk as well.
Absolutely. And I think the advantage I had, because obviously I'm not 20 anymore, in less than a week I'll be 33, but I look
what
12.
You're 12? No.
So you can imagine how young I looked as a 20-year-old. But I do genuinely think that cut down a lot of barriers for young people. because I probably acted like I was one of them, naively, and thinking back irresponsibly, probably some of my practice. I've learned a lot since then, but I spoke to them like they were human, and I hope I treated them with the respect that they deserved, because, to be honest, I just felt like one of them, and I was a cheeky 20-year-old, and I was probably a 20-year-old by age. I certainly wasn't, by kind of development. I was still playing catch up. So I did think that helped, and because that then gave me confidence, because they were approaching me and they wanted to talk about anything and everything, and why they didn't want to go home, and why they were out until 1 a.m. chucking eggs at windows of people's houses and getting the police called out, because actually they just wanted to be protected, and they felt more protected when the police were there, or when we were there with our detached work, youth work bus and things like that. So that then helps break down those barriers at the earliest opportunity, and actually for that young person, having someone just there to listen or be there, whether it be me or one of my colleagues, because I work with a fantastic team. Who knows how that helped them, but I'm sure it did help them move forward, and at least have the confidence that they could open up and speak about whatever was on their mind.
And 20 would be sort of on the cusp of, I mean, you said you were very youthful looking, you still are, but 20 will be on the cusp of either being a big brother to them, or almost being a paternal figure to them, like a father figure to them. And again, it just makes it so much easier to speak to somebody if you feel like you've got that common link, and if you feel like they're not going to be completely serious or completely out of your world, like they're going to have some understanding, and you would have had some understanding of what some of these kids were going through. You wouldn't have been like a stranger in a strange land in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely, and that definitely came across. Yeah.
And how did you move from that role onto the next one?
Well, my next move was into supporting young people who have been made homeless and were living in supported accommodation, and that was out of that love that grew for working with people and working with young people in particular. And a job came up in the area where I was working, and it sounded exciting and interesting, and I wanted to support these young people who had clearly been through a really difficult time in their childhood, and that's where that passion for working with people, working with vulnerable people, but actually, being able to speak to people and help people and guide people, that's where that came from. So the sports then was dropped. I didn't want to be a sports coach anymore. I wanted to work with people, and that job then gave me that opportunity to do so. And that was a fantastic job. And I met some fantastic young people. But the heartbreaking part of that job that led me into the world where I am now, which is really early help preventative, was because we were working with the youngest young people we worked with, were 16, who had been made estranged from their family, their family's decision. And the damage that was caused to those young people was heartbreaking. Not always irreparable. We did some fantastic work. I'm very proud of it. But it opened my eyes to, if we can work earlier, and if we can start having these conversations earlier, that can prevent a whole world of trouble for people as they grow older. So that was a brilliant stepping stone into the world I am now, and where I've spent the last 10 years, I guess. Doing kind of early help preventative, strategic kind of work, and getting in early, speaking to people, and having these types of conversations.
Superb. I think my question leads on to the work you're doing now then, Alex, with young people. we're living through. I mean, as we're recording it on the 22nd, but as of the 23rd, it will be a year since the whole country's been on some form of lockdown, however many, the trilogy you want to call it. But going forward with young people, what do you think will be the biggest concern? We know mental health is a massive concern, but thinking about NEAT, not for those that don't know what NEAT is, that are listening or watching, it's not an education, employment, or training. Do you feel that's a concern for young people that might be having to fight for jobs, which then in turn will play havoc on their mental health? What are your thoughts on the way ahead?
Yeah, it's a minefield, really, Al, isn't it? So my role now, just to give a bit of context, I work in a small team, and basically we get requests and referrals into early help type support, and we help guide professionals from schools or mental health services, anybody, to try and understand what that support needs to look like and signpost to services. So what the last year has shown is the increase in mental health concerns in young people and parents has been quite alarming. And people have really struggled to be close and those changes and adapting. But as the year progressed, obviously people got used to it. And now what we're seeing in the last, how long has it been since schools reopened? A couple of weeks. Again, a real increase of young people really struggling to go back to that structure. An increase of young people going missing, high anxiety over having to go back into schools, being around people, being around a high number of people. So in terms of young people's mental health, it's, I don't think you could put really a level on the impact it's had. But then as that time progresses, that's not going to just change overnight either, is it? And that year they've missed of socialization, education, obviously, but all of those social skills are so important to building empathy, to having conversations, to just meeting new people and building new relationships. The damage certainly in those kind of later teen, early adulthood, although adulthood at 18 I don't really agree with, but that age and stage, that's going to be really difficult. They're going to need a lot of picking up and a lot of educating, and not just about academic stuff, but about important things like building relationships and having simple conversations.
And those pro-social behaviors, it's a developing brain, and it's a bit like a garden that's not being watered. It's either going to kind of, well, rot away sounds a bit too Hollywood, but I mean, like, it's going to stagnate to some extent, or maybe there'll be some regressions. I don't know, in terms of pro-social behaviors and in terms of being able to socialize. I always get the image of just people retreating into caves and maybe not coming back out again when the lockdown ends. They just don't want to come back out. They don't know how to come back out. Everything outside their cave is terrifying now, whereas previously it wasn't, because that's what we do every day. It's like lifting the curtain up, just to mix metaphors and now go onto a Wizard of Oz theme, lifting up the curtain and going, oh, is that what's behind that? Well, why should I come out of my cave? I'll stick around in here. And I think the three of us probably gravitate towards looking into a person's youth, and looking at upbringing, and looking at ACEs, like you mentioned at the start, looking at trauma, looking at negative experiences, because we can see a clear link between how a person is in early adolescence, late adolescence, adulthood, compared to how they were as a child as well, if that makes sense. We all follow that thread back, I think. But do you see a lot of suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, suicidal behaviors in your work? and in your previous work as well. And you don't have to go into specific detail in terms of people that you've worked with because of confidentiality. We're not going to ask you that. We're not going to shine light on your face and get you to tell us everything. But yeah, are there things that you can share?
Yeah, I think it's fair to share examples without giving names or specific details, but absolutely, we do see. If I reflect back, it's things that I probably have seen throughout my professional career, but it becomes more obvious, apparent, as you learn and you get more experienced and you understand kind of what's behind what people are saying, so you understand more how to approach those conversations. But again, I would say in this last year, maybe even within these last few months, I've probably seen more in that period of time than I did in the last 10 years. And I'm happy to share an example of a parent that I spoke to quite recently, who had been supported by services, by teams that I work alongside, and being supported well. There's nothing wrong with the work that was done by professionals, but professionals closed and ended. It all looked fine. The reason they were involved was because, well, one of the reasons was mum's mental health was having an impact on young daughter's behaviours. And especially at night time. Daughter wasn't sleeping, was playing up at night time, wouldn't go to bed on time, and everybody was tired. She wasn't sleeping through the night. So a lot of stress increased. And a referral came back to us to pick up from the crisis teams at A&E, as mum had presented, as having suicidal thoughts and wanting to end her life and wanting to end her daughter's life as well. So the police were involved, crisis teams were involved. And it wasn't until a couple of days later that kind of referrals, because this is what happens in professional world, the processes kind of send it down a pathway. And I had the luxury of speaking to mum, and I phoned her and we had a conversation. And I felt confident enough, having had a brief interaction with her, introducing myself and letting her introduce herself, to say, how are you now? And we spoke for about 45 minutes, and we spoke about how she was feeling, and she essentially said, I'm lonely. I've got my daughter. She doesn't sleep. The behaviour after professionals closed came back again. It's increased and increased. I've got nobody to turn to. The daughter's father wants nothing to do with her. And you start to see a picture of all of these stresses, no sleep, no networks of support, child in distress, and everything got on top of her. And she openly said it was a cry for help. I didn't want to end my life. This was a cry for help because I need some support. And she told me, I don't feel listened to. So we had that conversation. What will help you feel listened to? And, you know, who's helped you the most previously? And she was able to identify certain professionals from daughter's school, for example, and also family members. So from that point on, in my opinion, and what my recommendations were to the teams, were that we needed to actually work and set up a plan with the whole family and build those support networks that would be with the family after professionals have gone. If I was being hypercritical of services, it's probably the thing we fail to concentrate on. Certainly historically, we're getting more training, which is great. But we do our job and we do it very well, but we forget to leave them with that package of support, if you like, from the community and from the support networks. And maybe that's what happened this time. And in terms of the daughter and how she was feeling scared. And she had told Mum this: I'm scared that you're not going to be there when I wake up.
Wow.
And then you start to see that there's that knock-on effect for the child, because Mummy's not got anybody to speak to, so she speaks to me as an 8-year-old child, and she tells me that she doesn't want to be here. Well, if I go to sleep, then she might not be there. But if I'm awake all night, then I can protect Mummy.
You were saying though, Alex, I mean, just butting in a little bit, but the child has become a young carer, and
Absolutely.
and then that traumatic experience adds to her ACE score. I think from what you're saying there, that there's no support, and some professionals want to just get on with the job. Unfortunately, I think in the profession that I'm at, which mirrors yours to some extent, because I'm a big advocate of early intervention, early from a practitioner level, showing some form of trauma-informed practice. But what gets me is when the people that are there to attend on the first instance, they come back and feedback saying, "Oh, I've been in the job too long. I don't need to do this. I don't need this form of practice because I learn as I go, and I've got life experience." And I just think, okay, but life evolves, and we're still discovering, parts of the brain that we never even thought were possible, to nurture and to sort of explore. So I think you're more. I really want to hear more about the story, but yeah, it just vibrated, a lot of similarities with the professions that we're both in.
And I think that point about professionals who can get stuck in not wanting to learn, and we talk about ACEs and trauma, that's still relatively new practice. That's only really been in the last 3-4 years that it's become widely distributed as training. And certainly in the area I work, it's not as widely trained as it maybe should be. Not as many practitioners are well versed in trauma-informed practice as probably need to be. And as we learn and as we understand more about the impact of adverse childhood experiences and trauma, obviously we're going to learn new ways of training and new ways of communicating with people to support that better. So there are those professionals, and on the other end of the spectrum, there are those professionals who are front facing with children, young people, with their families, with vulnerable adults, who also don't feel confident enough or well trained enough to be able to listen and want to. It's like becomes a hot potato then, and they want to pass it on. And if I could say anything to any professional that would be listening to this, is that there is a reason that person's come to you. Whether you feel confident or not, there is a reason, and you don't have to know the answers. But you are there to listen and guide as best as you can, and be vulnerable as well. We're allowed to be vulnerable as professional people.
I think to go back to the mum in your story, so she was essentially saying, I don't want to be here anymore because I don't like the life that I find myself in, and to find myself in a different life seems impossible, seems completely infeasible. So the best thing for me to do in this case is to not be here anymore. And it's fortunate that she came to you, and it's fortunate that she was able to find support in the people that you were able to signpost to. And I think the statement she made when she said this was just a cry for help, I think that's probably where the fork in the road can come in. Or more than a fork. There's several strands, several different paths she could have gone down, depending on the professional she would have spoken to, because there would be some professionals that would see her say, "This is a cry for help," and know that that is a genuinely desperate person who has run out of options in their head, and then they receive empathy and compassion and kindness and unwavering support. Whereas she could have said the same thing, it was just a cry for help, and been dismissed and been told she was attention seeking, been told that she needs to just crack on and get on with it because she has a daughter, as if it's that easy. And there's no compassion, there's no empathy, there is impatience, and again maybe there's a lack of confidence in that professional, which then manifests as minimizing and dismissive. But regardless, it kind of brings us to the point of this episode where there are, is it fair to say there are right ways and wrong ways? Because that can't be that simple. Some people will respond to different ways, I suppose. That's a more authentic way of looking at that.
I think there's do's and don'ts.
Mm-hmm.
Whether there is an actual right way or a wrong way, I'm not sure, but there are definite do's and don'ts, and being empathetic and compassionate and actually listening is a very big do. And dismissing or changing the subject, shrugging things off are definite examples of don'ts in situations when you're confronted with that. And I suppose, in fairness to some professionals, they are put in situations where maybe they're not comfortable, don't have that either professional experience or life experience, if you want to put it that way, but they might be the child's teaching assistant who's in the first week of their job, and a parent might come up to them because, well, you're a professional, so you should know the answer to this. And that's difficult. So the more in kind of every organization, teams can build confidence and can build structure to help people feel, to help professionals feel safe when having these conversations as well, I think is important. It's not just about that one individual, it's about how we all kind of work and create environments where we can all feel kind of safe in having conversations that we might not want to have, but are very important to that person who's approached us.
She was so full of kindness for everyone else, she forgot to save a little just for herself. How are you feeling? Like my heart's been ripped out of my chest, into my mouth, and now thumps in my head. It hits like a wave of bricks, drowning in disbelief, as I desperately claw to the surface of my sweat-drenched sheets. The devil's come to stay, sitting on my chest, making it impossible to move all day.
Yeah, I know that definitely, probably still to this day, I will respond to suicidal thoughts in ways where there could be scope for improvement. And I don't say that to beat myself up. I just say that self-awareness, hopefully. And that's where the training and the life experience comes in really well with that. But definitely early on, I I would have been like a rabbit caught in the headlights, I think. And no matter how much training you have, it can still come as a big shock. And particularly if you have that kind of therapeutic or supportive relationship with somebody, and then suddenly they're saying they don't want to be here anymore. I mean, we're all human. It hits us, regardless of the training or the experience. It still hits us. But yeah, there's definitely times when I could have done better, but I don't feel like I'm a bad person. I just feel like I'm human, and I've made mistakes, or I've missed warning signs, I suppose, or I've said the wrong thing. I do have a story that I can just interject in here, but it's when I called up a helpline once, and I won't mention who the organisation were because they do very good work. And I don't know if the person on the other end was just getting a bit annoyed or frustrated or tired, or maybe they'd had a long day.
Can you
But I
name
think
him? Can you name him? Or did he say his name?
Shame.
Barry.
What-
Let's just call him Barry.
Well, Barry had a very feminine voice, but
Farina.
but yeah, I called. I don't have any malice towards this person either. I should just say, I'm looking back on it now. At the time, I was furious, which was at least a different feeling from what I was
I was
feeling at
going
the
to
time.
say, at least they got, you were angry.
Yeah, so I was talking for about 30 or 40 minutes and just tying myself up in knots and going around in circles, and it was reflective of my mind at the time, where I felt like there was no way out or no solution. And it got to the point where I said, and I know this sounds very, I don't know, one man would call it pretentious, another man would call it poetic. But again, this was genuinely how I was feeling, and I was trying to paint a picture of my mind to this person. And I said, I feel like I'm trapped in the prison of my own mind.
It's a good song.
They said, and they laughed first. They went, "Ha, that sounds a bit dramatic, doesn't it?" And then I hung up.
Wow.
Because I thought this person isn't getting it. But again, I can see why, because like there's nothing you can really say. But then I take Alex's point where
You don't say that.
Don't say that.
That's definitely on the don't list. Laughing is definitely on the don't list.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's my story anyway. I think I've probably got more, but I'll save it for there. Maybe I'll save it for another episode. But I don't know if you've got any do's, any killer statements, if you pardon the pun, or things that tend to go really well compared to others. I've had advice before about being really nonchalant, and I don't really like that. I don't feel like that's a good way. It's a bit like chess, where you're trying to take the sting out of what somebody's saying by pretending it doesn't matter. But again, nah, not for me. But yeah, do either of you actually have any do's?
Alex?
I'm
trying to think of some.
Me too. I'm not. I don't want to sound like I know what I'm doing, because this next statement is a clear indication I don't know what I'm doing, and I tend to wing it. I've winged it through my professional career. But I wouldn't say I have a strategy, and it's very much each situation as it comes. And I think the quicker you can get in tune with somebody to understand where they're at, the easier it's going to be to give a reasonable response. But that goes back to that right and wrong. I don't know that there is a right way, and I think all of us will have had examples where we've kind of got off the phone to somebody or ended a visit with somebody and got back in our cars and thought, I've made a mistake there, or I should have said that. But that's the journey of learning, isn't it? And that's why we use our experiences to learn and grow as practitioners. But I just think it is about, in those early conversations, just sitting there and listening and giving somebody the chance to speak. And the example of the parent that I shared, she was saying, I just don't feel listened to. So in that time, it was very much about me. Okay, I'm here. Throw it at me. you know, get it out, you know, I'm not going anywhere. So I didn't really say much, if I'm honest. So whether I could pick a pearl of wisdom out of that, I don't think I could, because, you know, she did all the work herself, bless her. But that is what it's about, really, isn't it? It's about being there and not laughing at people.
Showing up, and I like what you said there about I'm not going anywhere, and that is the do in itself, isn't it? It's not the killer lines, it's not the strategies, it's not the pulling a rabbit out of the hat. There's not one size fits all. This is guaranteed to work. I much prefer your approach and your do there, in that everyone is going to be different. And you say winging it, and I don't know if you said it in a bit of a self-deprecating way, but I actually see that as a great strength in anybody. If they can wing it, I see that as them adapting to situations, and I see them almost adapting to the person in front of them, and just knowing, it's like that innate sense. And again, I don't think you'll take this compliment, but it's that innate sense that you do know what will help that person in front of you, because they know what will help, and they just need the time and space, and maybe the vocabulary and the confidence to be able to explain to you what it is they need. But you have to kind of tease it out of them by being there and by sitting there for as long as it takes, time permitting, funding permitting, but as long as it takes until they get to that point where they have solved it for themselves.
Do you know what you call it in the professional mindset? It's not winging it, it's dynamically risk assessing it. That's what it is. Jargon.
I need a pen and paper, because I need that one. That's going down.
You are dynamically risk assessing life.
Yeah, dynamically risk assessing, yeah.
Alan, do you agree?
100%. And there's no other percentage higher. You can, $1,000,000% no. But I think the fact of the matter is, it's letting that person be selfish for it. You know, if you are the what do you call it, the mental pillow that they can punch, scream at, kick, scream, do whatever they need to mentally. If it's physical, then that's a different story. But I think it's just letting them be as selfish as they need to be as narcissistic as they need to be for that moment, and then they will uncover the truth themselves. It's letting them take their own journey. Again, it's that horrible buzzword journey or whatnot. But if they're not being listened to, if no one's being listened to, then things get stored inside internally, and then that forms another layer upon another layer and another layer, and eventually it'll be the lid being flipped. Yeah. As we discussed in the first episode. But yeah, we don't want any lid flipping.
And those negative experiences, the detrimental impact and the lack of confidence that person then has in you. I bet, Rowan, you didn't phone that organisation back.
I haven't. I haven't to this day.
No. What's the name? What does it rhyme with? Like,
My lips are sealed. They do good work.
There's good and bad in everything. There's always a bad egg.
Yeah.
You just got the bad egg on their bad day.
Yeah.
But if you're, say, doing a piece of work that's going to take a few weeks or months, and you break down those barriers early on, it's going to be a really long few months for all of you. They're not going to, the person you work with isn't going to feel comfortable, confident, and open up to you. And professionals do sometimes fall into that trap of non-engagement. We see that a lot. I don't know if you see that in your worlds, but they won't engage with me. And sometimes I feel we fail to look inside about what have we done to build that non-engagement. And sometimes we can put the blame, not always, but sometimes we can put the blame on the family, or maybe it's just not the right time. But I think that there's plenty of do's, but those don'ts, those dismissing of the conversations, rapidly changing the subject, laughing. You know, they're the ones that really avoid. If you're ever
absolutely. And it's well, to go back to what Alan was saying about allowing them to be to be in their own head and to just speak and speak and speak and to have the spotlight on them, it's vital for their survival. Maybe you're essentially helping them survive in that point. You're sherpaing them up the mountain so that they can find out what they need at the top. And I'm conscious that at the start, Alex, you mentioned that maybe you would go back into your experiences as well, and anything that you would be happy, maybe that's the wrong choice of word, but willing to share with us that you feel might be helpful. And it might be how people have responded to you, it might be about your own thoughts or experiences, but go as far as you want to. And you've got a couple of Sherpas.
Yeah, well, it's relevant, I think, because I don't think it's by luck or chance how I ended up where I am, really, when I reflect back on my life. And I grew up in first 10 years of my life in a violent household. Saw a lot of things that no child should see, and heard a lot of things that no child should hear. So my childhood really was one of really quite high anxiety, and really through my adolescence. And it's funny, you talked in episode 1 about that 25. You know, I felt it at 25, which just happened to coincide with my my last round of therapy when I had CBT. It's around that age that I really felt like I turned a corner. But those experiences at that time, and living in fear, and I talked about that girl who was scared that mum wasn't going to be there. I was constantly scared of going to school, or I'd creep into my mum's bed because I wanted to protect. So I could relate that feeling. I got that. So I could build that emotional intelligence, if you like. So school days weren't happy days for me, really. I wasn't a good learner, high anxiety all the time. I just couldn't concentrate. I did okay. I was the child, that quiet child that we always teach practitioners, look out for. There's a reason they're quiet. So I kind of breezed through education, really. Probably some teachers would say I didn't fulfill my potential, but I did the best I could with what I had. I went to grammar school. I got A levels. I went to 2 universities because I shied out of my first one after a few months. I actually shied out of my second one after a few months as well, but that then goes into the second part of my journey. So at 19, my very best friend, who I'd been in the same class with him since preschool, and he tragically passed away when he was in America on a football scholarship. He was at university in America, and that was when we were about 19. And that's the thing that really hit me hard. And the time when I had the biggest thoughts of suicide are very vivid in my memory. And a few days after, so he died at a weekend. I remember I was visiting home, and a few days after, I was due to go back to university, which I did. That was the plan. I was in a deep state of shock, as probably everybody in the family was. And I was at a university in Scarborough at the time. So I got on the train from Lincoln. There was a few changes, and I remember I had a long change at Doncaster train station. And I can picture it, Harry Potter fans, like at the end when Harry Potter's in King's Cross, I can picture it like that. And I was waiting for my train for about an hour. And I just remember thinking to myself, it would be really easy. It'd be really easy to there's a fast train coming. That's it. And at that time in my life, there wasn't anybody. I didn't have anybody traveling with me. You know, there wasn't really any people on the station. Not that I would have felt like I could have approached anybody anyway. And there was two people that really saved me. And one was my friend at uni, Kelly, who I got on my final train. And I said, "Can you meet me at the train station?" And bless her, she did. And on the walk back to uni, I told her. And she told the rest of the people. I stayed at uni for another week. It was the longest week of my life. I didn't leave my room, except for a couple of times. But the other person that really saved me was the I can't remember what title it was, but like a pastoral worker at university. And one of my friends said, you know, go and I've made a meeting, go and see her. And she was that person that did that. She was the first professional I spoke to that did that. Right, I'm here to listen. And she said, forget about uni. I'll contact all the lecturers and, you know, forget your work and all of that stuff. Go home, basically. And I went home, and I never returned to university after that. And that was a difficult few months, but I got home and I was really well supported by my family. Got myself back on my feet, and that's when it was my mum who managed the team that I first volunteered for in youth work, coaching a young football team. That's how I got into that. So it did all kind of interlink in the end, and my work with young people in many ways saved me, because it gave me meaning. But also, I think my experiences growing up has helped me be the practitioner I am as well. So that journey, if you like, is all very intertwined and I think quite meaningful.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm so sorry to hear about your friend. But it is a very meaningful, I hate the word journey, but it's a meaningful journey, because I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of a wounded healer. So I'll put a link to it on the description, but it's the theory that the people who can best support people in the future are the ones who have been supported successfully in the past because they've needed to be supported.
Yeah.
And it's almost like it opens up another dimension, or you add a couple of paints to your palette that nobody else has access to. And I don't know, maybe it is just because you have looked at the train track and you didn't jump, and you know that you had that. Again, I don't know, I hesitate over the word strength, because then that suggests that people who do look at the train track and do jump don't have strength, which I feel like they still have. But hopefully you know what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah.
That you looked at the train track and you made the decision not to jump, and you made the decision to take the longer journey instead, back to where you are now, where you can use the experience and where you can use your skills and your knowledge, and you can almost look at kids and say, mate, I've been there and it does get better. And you say that to some people and they go, nah, no, it never will. It never will. And I find myself telling people this as well. And I don't want it to sound like it's a trick or anything, because it is genuine. It is like from deep down somewhere, it's just a genuine belief that I can say to somebody, I can't tell you when, I can't tell you how, but it can get better. And you just have to trust me on this. And inevitably, to a person, and I counted myself in amongst that group as well, when I was told it, it was like the most frustrating thing that anybody could tell me. It will get better. No, what do you know? Nothing has ever happened like this ever before. This is entirely unique. But I tell people it and they don't believe me, and I say that's fine, because I know. And I think you can only get that if you've been through stuff, and if you've been to those places, and if you've been on the platform stepping over that white line, even if just for a second. But what you're doing as well, Alex, is you're supporting a whole generation of people to then grow up to support a whole generation of people, and you're doing it because of what you went through and how you were supported. You're saving the world.
It single-handedly, it feels.
Absolutely.
Quite. We'll probably cut that bit.
That's it.
But I think, you know, I work with some incredible people, and I've supervised some incredible people who have felt confident enough and comfortable enough to share me some of their experiences growing up. And what you said there kind of hits the nail on the head, really, in that, you know, that wounded healer. I think people who do suffer trauma, difficulties in their early years are likely to be drawn to work like this because they know it and they feel it. And that phrase, "it will get better," is almost become cliched. But actually, when it comes from somebody who's been there, it's not a cliche. It's coming from a really genuine place. And maybe that's a bit of self-affirmation that it got better for me, and I'm quite proud, you know. And when you're saying that to people, I bet you feel quite proud of what you've achieved in your journey as well, right? So, you know, we're all, I guess it almost said journey again. And it is a word I hate as well. It's on that list of words don't ever say, and then you find yourself in situations like saying it about 10 times. But we continue to be on it as well, right? And those early years have made me the person I am, but that's why my wife sometimes has to put with quite a grumpy husband. Like when Manchester United lose, for example, I probably don't respond to that always as appropriately as I could. Although now I'm quite used to it, so it's fine. I'll say it before anybody else does.
No, I won't say a word. But, you beat us, didn't you, earlier in the season? So I'm not going to talk about that. But anyway, no, I think it's admirable, really. The way you even speak, Alex, it's calming, and it makes it, and rightly so, it makes people that are around you, and the ones that you talk to and the ones that you interact with, it should make them feel relaxed as well, and part of the circle, your circle, for however long it needs to be. But I do feel as though you're right to applaud yourselves, both of you, you know, and even me. You know, we can self-affirm how well we've come out of the other side, however big or small the thoughts were, how big or small the actual attempts were. I just think personally people need to hear these scenarios a lot more, and I do feel as though, and I think I've said it in a couple of episodes beforehand, listen to us, in a few episodes previous, I think it's good that young people now, I mean, not all young people, but a fair few of them are willing to put their heads above the parapet and speak. They just need the mentoring, they need the coaching, and that's what you are. You're a mentor and a coach, all rolled into one. A wounded healer, as we've rightly said. So yeah, fair play.
And people like yourselves and what you're doing, and like I say, having podcasts like this, it's quite brave to start a podcast about suicidal thoughts. It's not the most talked about subject, right? But that's the point. But the more people like yourselves do this, the more people will feel confident. And in a few years' time, when you've got millions of subscribers and you're on daily morning TV,
absolutely,
you know, these kind of conversations will be just normal.
24/7 rolling news.
Absolutely,
that kind of thing.
It's so not Rowan again. Oh my god.
But
it will be hosting Supermarket Sweep in a few years.
How about that? Great.
Your Donna Ryland beard. Donna Ryland beard. Go for it. Anyway, yeah, carry on, Ro. Sorry.
Well, to kind of sum up in a lovely little nutshell, we're going to say that the ways that people would ideally respond to suicidal feelings are with warmth, with empathy, with their own experience somewhere in their mind, but not necessarily self-disclosing that experience. Although I'm conscious that the three of us have done that at some point, if not in this podcast, in another one. But this is separate to the work, so that's fine. So warmth, empathy, own experience, compassion, kindness, not laughing at people, not minimizing or diminishing anything they've been through, not putting them down, not calling them names, but listening, just listening to what they have to say or what they're showing. Because with that little girl, she's in an intense state of fear. She's in the red zone. She's telling you how she feels every time she shows that behavior and every time she's staying up late. And as well as that neat little sum up, there's one last question, isn't there, Alan?
Always. There's always that one trigger question that is synonymous in the Feel No Shame podcast series. Here it comes. Are you going to say it or am I?
You always say it because it's yours.
You could harmonise.
Thanks. We could do. If you could talk to yourself if you were younger. No, that's terrible. Sorry. Basically, if you could get in a TARDIS, hop back to you as a younger self, whatever age it may be, and you step out of the door and go, "Hey, Al, Lex," what would you say to yourself to harness that belief? I mean, we've already discussed it in the original in the other episodes about, well, always be your inner child. But if you could say to yourself at a certain age, it's going to be okay, how would you say that question to them? What would you say?
See, I knew you were going to ask me this question because I have listened to your podcast.
Yeah,
such a horrible question.
it is.
I'd like to tell younger Alex. I was going to say smaller Alex, but I'm not much taller than I was when I was 10. So I'll say younger Alex. To be more confident and be braver.
Yeah.
And you don't have to live in that fear all the time. I think I'd have wanted younger Alex to enjoy those school years a little bit more. And I hope he'll be intelligent enough to know it gets better because I've come back to him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what I'd tell myself. Just enjoy that childhood.
I mean, it is an awful question, isn't it? It's all about hindsight, really, isn't it? It's like, yeah, whatever, yeah, maybe you should enjoy yourself more. But I think it's embracing that inner child even as an adult, and I think I do it on the regular. I still love Lego and so on and so forth, and that's just the essence of youth and whatnot for me. But yeah, it's a fantastic answer still. I think it's just saying it does get better, and we've discussed about it already. It gets better. However long it takes.
And even if there is that hindsight, and if there is that sort of regret at looking back and saying, I wish I'd enjoyed my childhood a bit more, you can still use that, and I'm sure you do still use that to motivate the work that you do now, where you can never go back and rewrite those wrongs and live that childhood again, but you can help kids now live the childhood that they deserve and that you deserved, but which was denied to you for several reasons. So it's not quite going back and rewriting history, but it's rewriting the future, if that's possible.
Do you know what? I'm gonna step in there because and it's quite it's quite an actual analogy that's recently come out. Zack Snyder's Justice League, right? Yeah, think about it. 2017 that film came out and it was rubbish. Right. It was rubbish, right? And
poor guy.
Apparently, it wasn't the original edit. It was done by the film production company that went, oh yeah, just quickly get it out. And they cut it, they edited the original footage, they took loads of stuff out, and it wasn't what the original director wanted. and there was an outcry, a public outcry to recreate it, redo, and they called it Release the Snyder Cut. And they brought it out on Sunday. It's 4 hours long, and it's an absolute masterpiece. It is. It really is. I mean, I'm a big fan of superhero films, but this was a more mature version of a superhero film, and that's what it is. It actually was rewritten, redone, and the original form came to fruition in its entirety, and it's been applauded. And that universe now, they're clamoring for more of the same. They're clamoring for more films from the director. Please make some more. Talk about these characters a lot more in depth. So it is what you've just said there, Ro. It's going back, revisiting, remastering, and seeing the fruits of the labour come to fruition. That was a really tedious link, but I thought I'd put it in there for everyone. But anyway, yeah, thank you.
Love it.
That's staying in. That's staying in.
I can stay in.
Yeah, thanks.
Do you still play football, Alex?
Yes, I do.
Okay. We'll play football one day. We'll get the inner children to meet, and we'll play football one day. Al, you're invited as well.
Thanks. I'll bring my Bielsa bucket and I'll just sit there and twiddle my thumbs like he does like that, and then scream at you for no reason in Spanish. But no, thank you so much for your time, Alex. That was really insightful listening to you. Thanks for
Thanks so much for having me. Genuinely.
I forgot the other big question, which is disappointing because it's the title of the whole podcast. But Alex, do you feel any shame about how you felt?
No, not now.
Beautiful.
Lovely stuff.
Good work. Shall we say bye?
Yeah. So do we do the a cappella? Maybe this is where Alex's talent comes out.
Okay.
He's not going to join in. No shame.
I'm not to ruin your listening experience, listeners, but honestly, it's been an absolute delight. And
that's not in the title. That's not in the title.
Sing it now. Beatbox? Can you beatbox?
Can I beatbox?
Can you beatbox? Can I beatbox?
There might be an app for that. Give me 5 minutes.
That award just over your shoulder for Beatboxer of the Year 2015.
What, this one?
That's the one.
That's a peace lily. Sorry.
Well, I'd like to give you a peace lily of my mind right now, but I'm not going to. Wait, just before we go, here's something I can show you. I've put it on my dog stuff again. I've put it on my Instagram and stuff like that. But have I shown you this? Ow.
Yes, I've seen it on the Feel No Shame Instagram channel. It's a broken vase.
But put together, Alex, with gold. It's a Japanese art form which begins with K, and I can't remember what it's called. But kintsugi, I think. And somebody made it for me. So it's to represent when something is broken, it can still be beautiful.
Beautiful.
So here we go.
Amazing.
That's very lovely.
From one peace lily to another. Goodbye and thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
There we go, another episode in the bag, in the can, in other places where you can put things. And thank you to Alex for speaking to us about everything that he talked about, including some really personal things. So we stayed on the line after the call just to check how it was all going with Al and Alex. And he said to us that he'd spoken on the podcast about things that he hadn't necessarily spoken about with anyone ever before, or at least not in the detail that he did. So thank you very much for sharing that, but thank you for speaking to us as a professional as well, and for just giving us an idea about the work that you do and the tactics that you employ, which seem very, very person-centered, and just putting that human first, not getting dazzled and distracted by the suicidal thoughts, but realising that there is quite often a desperate person behind them, a person who needs help and who is asking for help in the only way maybe that they know how. So thank you to Alex and others for responding in the ways that they do, with kindness, compassion, calmness, and just niceness, basically. But I should probably mention here, because I don't think we went into it enough on the actual episode, and maybe it seemed like we were critical of people who made mistakes, like the story that I, Rowan, told about when I called a helpline. So I realised that there was no malicious intent behind the person that I spoke to. There was no nefarious intent. They weren't trying to sort of push me further into the hole that I found myself in, but they were trying their best, I imagine. And sometimes when we hear suicidal thoughts and feelings from people, we respond to their panic by panicking, or we find ourselves mirroring them maybe, and that just happens. We're all human. So we would never want to sit there and be really critical of somebody who's trying their best. And hopefully it didn't come across as that. If you're trying, keep doing what you're doing. You're likely doing the best thing. So thank you very much to those people as well. And moving from the thank yous to a swift apology. Apologies for my dog if she made it into the final edit. She has started getting really woofy, is the only way I can describe it. And she responded to a slight noise outside and just disturbed the whole episode whilst Alex was in the swing of things. So apologies if that spoiled your enjoyment. She hasn't been punished because she's a dog and that's what dogs do. So sorry, but deal with it. And maybe I just won't bring her in next time. That's probably what I should say. There's a couple of things I'd recommend as well. So one of them is a book by a therapist named Irv Yalom. He's very, very good, very nice. And he also has some information in one of his books just about how therapists respond and how they work with suicidal feelings and intent. And also I'll put with that book I'll put it in the description to the episode, and I'll also do the same with some information on the concept of a wounded healer. And to go back to some final thank yous, so thank you to Young Minds, the charity, for all that they do, and for designing and creating a lovely yellow bracelet that I'm wearing at the moment, and that is on our Feel No Shame pod social media. So if you want to have a look at that, check that out, or try and spot it in the episode. And thank you as always to Therapoet for allowing us to use his poetry for the dark interludes, and for Zesty Jewellery, who made me the flower pot that I showed off at the end of the episode. So thank you very much. They're also that flower pot is also featured on our Instagram and Facebook page. So follow us, like, share, subscribe, YouTube, Spotify, just naming things now. But thank you for everybody. Thank you as always to Simon Martindale, and keep listening. We've got a couple of episodes left of this series and then we're going to take a break. But stay tuned for the next one. Keep safe, feel no shame, and goodbye.